All right, guys, hope you're doing well. Onward to a new plugin today. We're looking at Valhalla Supermassive. It's definitely one of the newer plugins that are out from Valhalla, but it's free. I want to point out on their website. I use it so much, guys, because it's probably the most interesting delay reverb combo plugin I've ever come across. It does different soundscapes. It does different modulation to these reverbs and delays. It does different feedback, along with all these different algorithms that's going on under the hood that we can't even see. It's honestly quite incredible and very impressive. If you guys haven't tried it out, I'm hoping today's video can give you a little bit of a boost to go grab it. Again, it's free. You know, you can't turn that down. I personally like using it a lot on vocals, maybe on the back track of a vocal, not on the main one that's popping out of the mix. I'm talking about something you're trying to design layer-wise on the back. You guys can use it on anything. Like I've done cinematic type stuff where I have to design a minute-long held-out sustain type pad or something very mysterious and have a lot of texture. This plugin can help you so much to design really interesting sounding stems and sound design. It can go a long way. So I'm going to use a track for this example that we used back in episode 1 when we worked on Fresh Air from Slate Digital. I'm going to use that vocal to work around today. So let's hear that before we get going.
No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not.
Okay. So if you guys checked out episode 1, you'll be familiar with the record. I'm going to load up Supermassive. Now, we're not going to go through every single mode that they have. We're going to talk about the interface here. I love how you can go full screen with it, high def. I love the design of it. The simplicity of the Valhalla plugins are what work best for beginning producers and professional producers. It's really the ease of use, and the interface is very nice. So you guys can see there's about 12 modes here. They've recently did a new version, 1.2 that I have. They released, I think, just the version 1, I believe, had maybe like 6 or 7 modes. So if you guys still have that one, I would recommend just going to the update. It's free again. So let's just look at the interface. Our mix and our width are really straightforward. Mix, dry, wet. You guys can see over here just controls a dry, wet. The one thing I want to point out with the mix that's really unique, when you guys are sifting through different presets, if you want the mix to stay the same while you're sifting through all these different presets, you can lock the mix amount that you have. So for example, let's say I only want to get about a dry wet of 20%. I can lock that in. I can go to my presets, and you guys can see the mix is never changing. So I'm getting the same amount of dry wet signal that I want throughout all these different parameters. So that's kind of cool to have, and something I find very useful that I'm not seeing in a ton of plugins. So the width, guys, is straightforward. 100% over here like we have it is going to be your maximum width. This is going to be more mono. And then the cool thing, guys, is when you go to a negative 100 all in here, you're going to really, I would recommend putting headphones on this, but you're going to really hear a flip in the sound. You're sometimes going to even turn your head and go, oh my God, that, you know, it gets a flip of the sound. What it's doing, it reverses direction, you know, of what you're hearing. So you're going to just hear this strange correlation change of the sound, and you'll find me working over here a lot. It's going to give different depth to whatever you're working on. You can automate this. It's really cool. Let's just, before we jump to a few more things, you guys can hear what I'm talking about.
No, I'm not,
So that's really wide, and then the mono.
no, I'm not, no, I'm not afraid.
Now listen to the switch when we go to negative 100.
No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not afraid.
So a lot of times I love automating that parameter. And we're only in 2 knobs here so far with Supermassive. That parameter, when you're automating and kind of creating this different depth change from stereo to mono to flipping the direction all the way to the negative 100, you're getting this really unique change in whatever sound you're working on. Again, I'm just kind of messing with the vocal today. Really, really don't sleep on that knob. The width and the mix are so important. Moving forward to obviously the biggest knobs here, the delay, straightforward, controls the length, the timing, the feedback of the delay. You guys can actually select milliseconds if you want to do it by a note, so it's really on grid. That'll tie up to your BPM of your DAW. That's really cool. Just kind of like any other delay, you do have those options, dotted, triplet. I find myself working in the milliseconds a lot. I get like a really unique and precise sound. When I'm working with delays and like reverb soundscapes that we're trying to make, I don't love stuff too on grid. That option is there, so mess with that. That's really useful to have. You guys can clear it. As you're listening, you'll notice if there's a really wet mix, it'll kind of carry on for a while. You guys can clear it while listening to it to kind of refresh the sound. So it'll sound like that. It'll keep restarting. Okay, moving to the warp knob. Very, very unique. You guys will hear, if you're messing with the warp knob while it's playing, you're going to hear this kind of changing of pitch, for example. So just clear that when you dial in something you like so you don't get the pitch change. Pretty crazy, guys. I'm only in one preset here. I haven't even touched on what they have. So far, I'm combining echoes with reverb. That's why this plugin is unique and mind-blowing for a free plugin. I can't believe when they put this out. I messed for maybe a day just in the studio from using it on percussions to effects to obviously the vocal here, and found just endless amounts of creativity with what's in the box. 10 or 12 parameters that we have here. It's incredible what you can do, and I'm only working so far in here. The next section is pretty important too. The feedback, as you guys know, the bigger feedback, the longer it's going to go on, whatever we have dialed in here. Just like a guitar feedback, it'll go on and on if you have it for a while.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not afraid. No, I'm not.
So it's gonna keep going and going and going longer that feedback is. I'll use that parameter a lot when I do cinematic type designs and stuff, kind of holding out tension builds. I like really automating that feedback parameter. The density, guys, really cool one here. That's going to control the perceived kind of number of echoes we hear. So the less density, we're not going to get too much.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not.
You can hear that higher density. It's paired with the feedback. That's when you can hold a lot of sounds out and just let them run. Now, when you're doing like a vocal, like we're doing a backing track with interesting kind of reverb, the feedback and the density, I would recommend having at a little bit of a lower setting, because then it's going to overtake the actual vocal that we're listening to on top.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not afraid. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not afraid. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not afraid.
Okay, so let's finish up on the parameters before I kind of mess with a few more things. The mod rate, guys, these are cool because this is where you'll create some interesting delay reverb combos where they start sounding a little trippy, but in a good way. You can get different sounding delays and reverb when they're combined.
No, I'm not.
So you're getting that modulating, kind of a tremolo type modular effect. That's up to you. You can also, it'll start introducing more of a chorus feel too, depending on where your feedback is, your density, your depth, all that stuff. But when I mess with the mod section, I start to get a lot of chorus and flangey, modulator. In fact, sometimes I don't always want that. I think it's very subjective to what you're working on. For a vocal like this, I do want to keep things a bit more pure and clean, so I'm going to dial those back a bit. Now, the last section, guys, the parameters, probably one of the most important. If you are not EQing your reverbs and delays, I hate to say this, but you've been doing it wrong. You have to EQ reverbs, delays, especially if you're doing sends, stuff like that. You have to control those as if they're their own track. So I am so excited that they have this. Valhalla has that in a lot of their plugins. When I'm doing any of these settings, this is probably the most, I'm glad they have it kind of at the end of the chain here. This is the most important part to get it to fit right. You don't want a bunch of lows, you don't want a bunch of highs when you're using as a back soundscape. So we want to get rid of all the lows.
No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid.
Okay, so now I have it more in a reverb mode. Now that I brought up the warp, the delay, the width, now it's going to sound more like a reverb. So let's now mix it in.
No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm
Pretty incredible, guys. That's just, 10 minutes of us kind of messing around with simple parameters. Think of how far you guys can go with different modes. Now, the different modes they have, I obviously won't go through all 12 of them. That's totally up to you guys to experiment. What they do is introduce different algorithms that the back end of this plugin has. This is going to adjust different attack times, decay, sustain of everything you have dialed in. So the parameters that we select here, even if we keep them the same per mode, it's going to sound different because it's introducing different algorithms. It's quite incredible. So make sure you guys go through the presets. They have different echoes, they have different mods, of course, reverbs, and then different sound effects. But in my opinion, everything that you mess with, from the echoes to the mods to the reverbs and anything you're experimenting with, you are creating a sound effect, period. You're creating a soundscape around anything. I'm just doing a vocal backing track for today's video. Think of the possibilities of messing with, say, a percussion group, let's say an effects group. The best thing that I've, gotten out of this plugin is creating sounds that I didn't think were possible. Taking a snare and I make it into a held out tension string. You can do all of that with processing and soundscape and designing with all these parameters. It's absolutely endless the amount of things you can do. Again, let's bypass back and forth here before we sign off on today's video.
No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not, no, I'm not, I'm not afraid.
So that's it, guys. Another thing before we sign off, make sure you try automating. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I'll automate the width, I'll automate the mix. These two knobs are probably the most common automations that I'm introducing. There's so many things you guys can do. Really pay attention to the EQ part. That's going to really help with making it sit in the mix properly. So guys, that's Valhalla Supermassive. Again, free plugin. Go over to their website and grab it. I highly recommend it. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Take care.